There is never a more appropriate moment in sports to point and laugh at another team than when they go out and blow a huge lead. And today, Schadenfreude is in the house because you're going to learn the quick story behind all 32 NFL franchises' absolutely most crushing choke job in the history of their team coming up right after this. Today's video on this awesome list on Pro Football Reference, which alphabetically lists out each team's most heartbreaking loss. But I decided to mix things up and list these out in a semi-rotation by division and conference. So Falcons fan, if you thought we were going to go alphabetically and get you out of the way first, you're wrong. But keep in mind, this exercise does include the playoffs, so Falcons fans, again, you're fucked. The Monday Night Miracle. Down 23 points in the fourth quarter, the Jets, led by Vinny Testaverde, rallied to tie the game at 30. The Dolphins took the lead again, but before regulation ended, offensive lineman Jumbo Elliott caught a TD, and the Jets won it in overtime. Arnold Schwarzenegger said of the game, "I think the Dolphins have to be terminated." Way back in 1946 at Griffith Stadium, the Redskins looked to be whipping up on the Eagles as they held a halftime lead of 24-0. Of course, that didn't last as the Eagles, led by Tommy Thompson, scored 4 unanswered TDs and ended up winning 28-24 in regulation. I think the jerseys were made of wool back then. What's one thing you don't do against Peyton Manning? Let him back in the game, and after getting out to a 24-point first half lead, the Chargers and Phillip Rivers looked to have things under control. After Manning threw 4 consecutive TDs to take the lead, Chris Harris capped the game with a 46-yard INT, and the Broncos won easily 35-24, and it was all Spanos' fault. The Cardinals, who were in Chicago at the time, got out to a 24-point third quarter lead over the Eagles in front of 20,000 at Old Metropolitan Stadium when Night Train Lane intercepted a pass and took it to the housey house. Of course, the Eagles would score 28 unanswered points, 21 in the third quarter, and win. And the Cards have been blowing opportunities since. Does anyone remember that Jim McMahon played for the Eagles? Well, older, saltier Browns fans do. Because in 1991, the squad looked like they were cruising to a victory as they jumped out to a 23-0 second quarter lead. The Eagles and Mr. Pluto started to claw back in the first half, and after 3 field goals in the fourth quarter, they scored with 3 minutes left to take the lead for good, 32-30. Sounds like a typical Browns game if you ask me. Christmas Eve gave the Viking fans a present they will never forget. Leading the Bengals 24-3 at the half, it looked like the Vikes could go to bed with hallucinations of sugar plums in their head. Only Jeff Blake and the Bengals had other ideas as they scored 24 unanswered points in the second half, including a field goal as time expired to hand out loads of coal to the Vikings faithful, and even worse, crush their playoff hopes. What sucks more than being an expansion team? Being a team that didn't get an OP expansion draft. In 2005, the 1-9 Texans, led by David Carr, jumped out to a 24-3 lead on Joe Vitt's Rams before half. The Rams, which still had pieces of a decent offense like Torrey Holt and Steven Jackson, came roaring back and eventually won the game on a Ryan Fitzpatrick TD pass to Kevin Curtis. Do you know what hurts more than being 0-13? Blowing the second largest lead in NFL history to become 0-14. In 1980, the Saints were surprisingly giving the 49ers the business, jumping out to a 35-7 first half lead, capped by Archie Manning's pass to Ike Harris. However, second-year QB Joe Montana showed that he had the stuff to make it in this league, furiously leading his team to score 31 unanswered points in a 38-35 OT win. Still not as painful as, well, you know. The last day of the season in a meaningless game. Well, no game is meaningless to Bill Belichick. In 2012, guess who? Ryan Fitzpatrick was on the field as the Bills jumped out to a 21-point first quarter lead on the eventual AFC champion Pat. And I guess the Pats woke up after that because they scored 49 unanswered points, probably after Belichick went apeshit on them for not beating up on the fucking sorry-ass Bills. You know what's fun about these? When the collapse occurred, and this one happened really late. Leading 23-0 in the fourth quarter, Ron Jaworski's Eagles looked like they had the Vikings right where they wanted them, until the Eagles decided that defense was not a thing, and the Vikings scored 4 TDs in a matter of minutes, including a 65-yard fumble return. And I just might believe that this was the worst blown lead in the history of the Eagles. Holy shit, Fitzmagic is all over this video. In 2011, the Raiders jumped out to a 21-3 first half lead, which they blew at the start of the fourth quarter. However, they did have some fight in them as they traded TDs with the Bills until down 4. With 14 seconds left, Fitzmagic showed everyone why he earned the chance for the Jets to overpay him and found David Nelson for a TD to ice the 38-35 win. In 1982, in the season opener, the Rams led 23-0 at half over the Packers until Lynn Dickey, not Lil Dickey, took over and dropped 35 uncontested points. The Rams finished 2-7 in the strike-shortened season. I guess their second half defense was still on strike. Heyo. As if the Ravens-Steelers rivalry needed more stoking, a game way back in 1997 gave a lot of ammo to Steelers fans. The Ravens, who had Vinny Testaverde under center, that's another one I forgot, held a 21-0 lead and promptly blew it like a Clinton-era White House intern. Cordell Stewart threw for 3 TDs but capped the game off with a 74-yard rushing TD to seal the deal. Leading 35-14 in the third quarter after Barry Sanders scored on a 45-yard TD. I guess the Lions decided to stop playing, or giving the ball to Barry because the Skins had other ideas. They would score the last 20 points of the game, 17 in the fourth quarter, to win it in OT, 41-38. Barry Sanders, just another example of the thousands of times when his team let him down. Thousands of times. You know why kicking field goals sucks? Because they aren't touchdowns. And field goals are what doomed the Colts in an early season game versus the Buffalo Dildos in 1997. After leading 14-0, the Colts kicked 4 consecutive field goals and led 26-0 and thought they had it wrapped up. Only the Bills had other plans, and their running game stepped up. Jim Harbaugh got injured, and with 5:21 left, the Bills led 37-29, eventually winning 37-35. There seems to be a theme here. A team jumps out to a quick early lead and then proceeds to watch it slip away like Harold Dean's presidential bid. After Tim Biakabatuka's third rushing TD put the Panthers up 21 points, the Redskins woke up, actually erasing the lead before the half. But this game was far from over as the Panthers roared back and took a 1-point lead late. Their failed 2-point conversion proved costly as the Skins ended up winning on a last-second field goal. Damn, son. What's this? The Jets blowing a game to the Patriots? You don't say. The Jets jumped out to a 21-point lead only to have it expire when the Pats tied it up at 24. The Jets fought back, but Drew Bledsoe finished the game off with about 4 minutes left with a TD pass to Keith Byers. Rich Kotite was the coach for the Jets, and that's all I really need to say. This game is probably the only time in my life I've wanted to punch a whiteboard and injure myself. I don't even need to look at the box score to tell you what happened. In a wild card game in 2003, with the Giants up 21 points, Jeremy Shockey did what he did best, not showing up in big games, and dropped an easy pass that would have sealed it. Then the Giants forgot what defense was as the 49ers roared back within minutes to take the lead. Finally, the Giants got in position to kick a game winner, but newly signed long snapper Trey Junkin did this shit. And the refs ignored blatant pass interference, which they apologized for later, and the Niners still won. And now I'm pissed. Do you know what the best part of watching Andy Reid coach is? Full Andy Reid. And that was never more on display than in 2014 when the Chiefs were absolutely smoking the Colts like a Boston butt. And right after half, Niall Davis found the stripe and put them up 38-10. And from then on, the Colts' luck changed. In a barrage night seen since the Blitzkrieg, the Colts roared back and got a few bounces, including this fumble that ended up being a TD. And with 4:21 left, they put themselves up by 1 for good. The good old days, back when Andrew Luck played football and Andy Reid choked in the playoffs. This game didn't start out as your typical blown lead game, as it was kind of back and forth. But in the third quarter, Jim Zorn put his team up 24 points as the Hawks led 34-10. And immediately after that, everything went the Broncos' way as they scored 27 unanswered points and ended up winning 37-34. This game is interesting because it actually happened on the same day as the previously mentioned game. The Bungles jumped out to a 24-0 lead, and then the Oilers decided to show up, eventually tying the game at 27 and winning in OT. The Bengals, a legacy of failure. The Bears blew a 21-point lead to the defending champ Patriots. The Bears held a lead of 21 with 6:42 left in the third and were up 11 with 2:46 left. Brady found David Patton with 21 seconds to go, and the Bears still suck, and I'm sure the Patriots cheated somehow. Do you remember how just a year ago the Jags sucked? But know this, Blake Bortles has never been swept by the Warriors. On the last day of the 2017 season, the Jags blew a 17-point first half lead to the Colts to finish their year 3-13. Of course, nearly 1 year later, the Jags blew a 10-point lead in the AFC Championship game. I'll link y'all to some burn centers. Way back when the Bucs sucked and Steve DeBerg led their squad, they blew a 25-point lead to the then St. Louis Cardinals. Up 28-3 in the third, the Bucs laid down like a cheap prostitute, and Neil Lomax led the comeback, with the Cards winning 31-28. 28-3. That sounds familiar. The biggest choke job from a blown lead standpoint the Pats have ever suffered came in 1979 when they blew a 24-point lead to the Dolphins. The Pats took their largest lead in the second quarter and then choked the rest of the game away like Mama Cass on a ham sandwich. Too soon? Matt Stafford has a history of doing the Cowboys dirty, and in 2011 he led an epic comeback that embodied the Tony Romo era for many fans. After Dez Bryant caught 2 TDs and Jason Witten added another, the boys found themselves up 27-3 in the second half. Then Romo threw back-to-back pick sixes and Megatron took over, scoring the game-winning TD with 1:39 left. And now Romo is doing what he does best, calling plays from the booth. What many people forget about Peyton Manning's best offensive season in 2013 was that they blew a 24-point lead to the Pats earlier that year. Most people just remember this play though. Cruising out to a first half 24-0 lead, it looked like the late season showdown between the two powerhouses was going to be a yawner. And then Belichick phoned a friend and it was all Pats and Gronk after that until Manning found Demaryius Thomas with 3:06 to tie it up. But the Pats still won in OT though. What's interesting about this comeback is that in the midst of it, the Vikings actually used 2 QBs to overcome a 24-point lead by the Niners. Bob Lee started the game and was shite. Then Tommy Kramer came in and went 9 for 13 for 188 yards and 3 TDs in 1 quarter. The Steelers, like the Jags, have been lucky not to blow tremendous leads. Up 21-3 in the first half, the Seahawks, led by that guy Jim Zorn, mounted a comeback and ended up winning 24-21. I wish I had more fail for the Steelers, so instead here's me reminding you that the Jags beat the fuck out of them last year in the playoffs. Way back in the 50s, the Packers blew their largest lead ever to the LA Rams. They actually led 28-6 late and 28-16 until they fumbled and the Rams scored 2 TDs in the fourth quarter to win 30-28. You ever watch a game and say to yourself, well, this one is over? And when Bubba McDowell intercepted Frank Reich early in the second half and took it to the house, the wild card game between the Houston Oilers, now the Titans, and the Bills pretty much seemed over. But almost as quickly as that play happened, the Bills were right back in the game, as the Oilers had a major problem they had been masking all afternoon. They didn't have a fucking defense. Once Chill Factor 14, aka Frank Reich, found his groove and the holes in that Oiler defense, it was pretty much an unbelievable display of offense you may never see again. 5 consecutive TDs scored in about 12 minutes, 3 of them to Andre Reed, had the Bills up 38-35 in a comeback that would impress General Motors. The Oilers answered with a late field goal, but back then the OT rules were sudden death and all the Bills had to do was cash in a 32-yard chip shot and this game was history. The Bills would go on to lose their 3rd consecutive Super Bowl that year. No wonder they jumped through tables. Well, I hope you enjoyed this vid, I certainly did, and please do not forget to download the FanDuel app and use my code BASEHIT10 and get a 20% cash bonus on your first deposit. I'm 5Points Vids and you made it to the end of this video.